Moving quicker than I anticipated, the University of Michigan has hired a new offensive coordinator. His name is Chip Lindsey, and today we're going to be talking all about him. So without further ado, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're coming at you with another Michigan football video. But before we get into the video itself, I am going to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by starting with the hire itself. Michigan has officially, late last night, hired former North Carolina offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey to be their new QB coach / offensive coordinator. He was not on my short list that I made last week about who I believe Michigan should target at the offensive coordinator position, largely because I didn't really think this was going to be a fit for him. And also, I wasn't anticipating Mack Brown being fired from North Carolina anyway, so Michigan would have had to have poached him, which is just not something that I think would have happened. I think they probably would have gone a different direction if Mack Brown wasn't fired, and North Carolina kept Chip Lindsey as their offensive coordinator. To give you a little background on him and how he got into coaching, he was a wide receiver for North Alabama University in the early 90s. After the playing career was done, he became a assistant coach for several Alabama high schools before ultimately getting a head coaching opportunity. He then worked his way bouncing around several other high school opportunities to coach. He then got his first college job in 2010 under Larry Blankley at Troy. And of course, as everybody alive knows, Larry Blankley coached at Troy, I believe, for 24 seasons. Was just a steadfast force for that program for a very, very long time. And Chip Lindsey cut his teeth at the college level there before returning to high school for 2 seasons and then ending up in Auburn as an offensive assistant in 2013. He then became the Southern Miss OC and quarterbacks coach / play caller. He was there for 2 seasons before leaving for 1 season at Arizona State, then returning to Auburn and then becoming the head coach at Troy for 3 seasons before leaving for UCF and then North Carolina and now Michigan. This is the furthest north he's probably been in his entire life. However, this is someone that does have a proven record on the recruiting trail in terms of who he's gotten to commit to programs and who he has developed while there. He worked with Nick Mullins while he was at Southern Mississippi, and of course, Nick Mullins is still in the NFL as a backup quarterback. He's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL, but primarily he is known for working with Jarrett Stidham at Auburn and Drake May for 1 year at North Carolina. However, it's also worth noting that he was the quarterback coach / offensive coordinator the offseason that Bo Nix committed to Auburn, who was a 5-star recruit, very talented football player. Obviously, he went in the first round of the NFL draft last year. So that is something of note as well. All in all, this is someone with a long history of calling plays, almost 2 decades of experience calling plays at the high school and college levels. This is someone who has been involved in the game planning process even when he wasn't calling plays as well. This is a very, very experienced coach and play caller that is not going to need his hand held. He will be able to kind of come in and take control of the offensive game planning process. I do not anticipate Sharon Moore needing to be as heavily involved as he allegedly was this year in the game planning and play calling process, which could free him up to focus more along the offensive line or to get onto the defensive side of the ball or do whatever Sharon Moore wants to do. Perhaps that's recruiting. But this hire, I do believe, will allow Sharon Moore to open up his schedule a little bit. He is known for explosive offenses regardless of talent or level of competition. He cut his teeth under Larry Blakeney, as I've said before. However, his actual, in terms of coaching branch, in terms of style and the way that he designs his offenses, is probably more Gus Malzahn / Todd Monken more than it is anything Larry Blakeney related. Moving on to the part of this video where we're going to be talking more about the specifics of his offense and what it looks like. These are the games that I watched to come to this conclusion. Only North Carolina film, because I didn't want to go back further than that. 2023 South Carolina, 2023 App State, 2023 Duke, 2024 Minnesota, 2024 Georgia Tech, and 2024 Florida State are the 6 games that I watched, largely because I did not have time to watch anything else. This broke late last night. It is currently almost 2 o'clock. I have to be at work at 4. I don't have time to watch more film than this. I'm going to start by throwing you some numbers, and this is maybe the most illuminating thing for the overall point that I'm going to be making about Chip Lindsey here. In 2023, 15.8% of his passes were at the line of scrimmage or before it. 35.1% of the passes were between 1 yard and 10 yards. 20.9% were between 10 and 20 yards, and 19.8% were deep. So pretty well balanced, all things considered, but he does work the short game more than anything else. Also, 15% screen passes, because that's effectively what at the line of scrimmage or before it means. That is a pretty high number, all things considered. So that is something that I think a lot of Michigan fans need to mentally prepare for. Michigan's going to be running a lot of screens, I think, or at least more than they've ever ran before. But the real important thing here is the area of the field where it's targeted, okay? 19.2% on the left, 58.1% in the middle, and 22.7% on the right. And why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why it's important. It is significantly easier, especially for inexperienced quarterbacks, to work in the middle of the field. The middle of the field has more space, especially in college, but also in the NFL as well, just to a lesser extent. But in college, the middle of the field is wide open because of the wider hashes, and he attacks that part of the field. So using these numbers here in 2023, the most likely play will be a play over the middle between 1 and 10 yards, at least when passing the football. And the vast majority of his passes are going to end up being over the middle of the field. He is someone that is going to take deep shots. Again, this is an offense predicated on explosiveness. So all things considered, a 20% almost deep shot rate is pretty good. I like that number a lot, especially given what Bryce Underwood's strengths are as a young player, as it's becoming more and more unlikely that Michigan's going to actually bring in somebody with the ability to beat him out. I am leaning more and more towards Bryce Underwood just being the starting quarterback and kind of just seeing how shit rolls for a year, which all things considered isn't, that big of a deal. But Bryce Underwood right now, his strength is throwing the deep ball. He's got a ton of arm talent, and Michigan is going after deep threats in the transfer portal. All things considered, I do think Chip Lindsey fits Bryce Underwood well. But let's get into the 2024 numbers, because it's easy to do what you want to do when you have Drake May, top 3 pick in the NFL draft, currently playing very, very well in the NFL as a rookie, as your quarterback. So the numbers in 2024 were slightly different. 17.7% at the line of scrimmage or before it, 33.5% at 1 to 10 yards, 23.6% between 10 and 20, and 16.5% deep. So all things considered, a little bit more at the line of scrimmage, a little bit less between 1 and 10, slightly more between 10 and 20, and a little bit less on the deep shot. So with a major downgrade in quarterback talent, he did adjust the scheme a little bit. He didn't take as many deep shots. He worked the shorter and intermediate sort of range a little bit more. And as you can see with the numbers down here that we're going to get to in a second, he also worked the middle of the field significantly more. He was 14.3% on the left, 66.3% in the middle, and 19.4% on the right. Meaning that when he didn't have the talent at the quarterback position, or the experience really for that matter, he went to the middle of the field, which again is easier to deal with than outside the numbers. He also increased the amount of screen passes and passes at the line of scrimmage, as well as taking away some of the deep shots. So this is someone that was willing to adjust his offense to the talent and the scheme that he had. Okay, in 2023, he was a lot more willing to take deep shots and pass the football because he had a top 5 pick at the quarterback position. In 2024, he didn't have that talent, but what he did have was a top 3 running back in all of college football in Omarion Hampton. So he ran the ball a lot more this year and relied on the running game to get a lot of those explosive plays. And that's good to see. What is also good to see is how the offense itself is actually ran. So we're going to transition here into what the offense is actually going to look like. Okay, there is going to be plenty of tempo in this offense. They ran the hurry up quite a bit during all of the games that I watched. There's a good amount of screens, as I kind of already touched on. However, this is probably the most important thing that I've got here on my list. Balanced approach to the game. This is not someone who is pass happy. This is not someone who is going to be afraid to pass the ball. All things considered, this very, very easily could end up being a 50-50 type of offense where it's 50% run and 50% pass. He does utilize tight ends, although it is not a focus of his offense, or at least wasn't in the games that I watched. Not a big quarterback run guy, but he will utilize it if he believes that he can get away with it, okay? So he called a couple of quarterback designed runs for Drake May, and Drake May is the kind of athlete that can run the ball. So all things considered, it was not something that he is specifically known for. However, it could be something that gets worked into the offense more, especially if they end up going out and getting a less mobile quarterback in the transfer portal, which, again, I'm not sure how likely they are to actually get a quarterback in the transfer portal. He creates mismatches with scheme, getting a lot of wide receivers on safeties and running backs on linebackers and tight ends on smaller slot defenders. So he knows how to create those mismatches and exploit them. It is also something I didn't really put up on this list here, a pretty creative offense. He does utilize deception a fair bit in terms of hiding the tight end and then having them go on a pop pass over the middle of the field late, stuff like that. All in all, he's not someone that's going to be pulling out trick plays like Ben Johnson or anything, but he is someone that will have a few rabbits in his hat, so to speak. The overwhelming majority of routes that I remember seeing were in breaking routes. So slants, digs, posts, stuff like that. All things considered, a lot of those layer sort of concepts is where he does appear to be the most comfortable. Quick, easy reads in breaking routes. This is a very, very quarterback-friendly scheme, It's not one that is particularly complicated. It's not one that requires a lot of field reading in terms of full field reads. It's pretty much just which one of these two wide receivers on the layer concept is open, throw it to the open one. Or when it comes to the run game, it's pretty much just a gap-based power run game. There was not a whole lot of zone runs or anything like that. He'd pull it out occasionally, but I'd say it's probably like 80-20 power runs as opposed to zone runs, which I also think is good. I'm not, traditionally speaking, a big fan of zone run games. I think it puts the necessity to have a running back with elite vision much higher than a power-based run scheme where you're running into a gap. But all things considered, as I already said, this is a very simplistic sort of college scheme. I do believe that he is someone that is going to be able to recruit well. I also believe he is someone that is going to be able to develop talent fairly well. And I believe that this is a good hire. How good, you may ask? Well, I'd give this a B/B plus kind of grade. This is a good hire. It's a safe hire. This is someone that I could see sticking around for 4 or 5 years, but this is also someone that I could see leaving after 1 year. And that's where a lot of this comes from in terms of my grade, why it isn't higher. Because it is a fit in terms of culture. It is a fit in terms of what Michigan wants to do. They want to be more explosive on offense. They want to be able to put up points, which is not something they've been able to do this past season. And he also wants somebody with Southern connections on the recruiting trail who could help in that regard as well. All in all, this is a good hire. If you told me he was going to be here for 5 years, it'd probably be B+/A-. However, I do think this is someone who is young enough that he will probably take a group of 5 head coaching job if offered. So even though he's, I think he's 50, exactly 50, that's not old by any means. It's not particularly young either, but he is in that sort of gray area where you're not too old to get a job, but you're not young, so you're probably not going to get like the really good jobs or the really bad jobs either. So I think Chip Lindsey could be a very, very good piece for this team going forward. He could also be gone after 1 year, and that is kind of a concern, but it's also not that big of a concern in my mind. I don't think it's likely that he's gone after 1 year. However, I would be surprised if the offense has a lot of success and Michigan does get into the playoffs and potentially wins a playoff game or two, if he wasn't going to start getting phone calls from group of 5 schools being like, hey, why don't you try being a head coach again and come on down over here. So I don't know if he would leave, because he'd probably be getting a downgrade in money, which is another thing that we'll get to in a second here. But it would be a concern slightly. Like, I don't have any concern that Wink Martindale is going to leave to become a head coach for Bowling Green or whoever in the MAC or the Sun Belt or whatever. Like, I don't think that's a real concern at this point, because they're not going to pay him $2.5 million. And also, he's never been a head coach in college. He's never even really been a head coach, period. But all things considered, Chip Lindsey is a solid hire. I think it's a good hire. I also think that a big reason why Michigan didn't go after perhaps a bigger name like Dan Mullen is because they probably would have had to have paid him north of $2 million a year. And you can't do that when you're also paying Wink Martindale $2.5 million and just about everybody else on the roster close or slightly north of $1 million as well. So this was maybe a little bit of a way to save money. He's probably going to make north of $1 million, but I don't know the exact number. If I had to guess, I'd probably say like 1.2 or 1.3, which for a quality offensive coordinator, that's about what the market dictates they are. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. To this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.